op-ed that you wrote and published in Fox News recently, and it's about young men being lost in society today. The title is you posted a quote, "With no purpose and a society that doesn't hold boys and men with any significant value, many are simply self-selecting out of society altogether. This is the silent crisis, why society is failing men and boys." So the first thing I want to ask you is, why did you write this piece?
Because I think that it's necessary. We talk about the problems that, specifically Gen Z, but men overall are facing. And even to mention them nowadays, still there's a lot of people that the pushback is, oh, poor white men, poor men, blah, blah, blah. They don't actually have any problems. They're just trying to claim victim, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And whereas that is not an unexpected reaction. That doesn't change the reality of the situation, that men are self-selecting out of society. Men are deciding to, instead of going out and trying to do things that will better themselves, they're deciding to sit around and play video games and smoke pot, which, look, I'm not judging you if you decide you want to play video games or whatever, if you like to smoke a joint once in a while. But there is way more to life than just sitting around masturbating to porn and smoking pot. Like there is way more to life. And we need men. Society is built by men. No matter how much feminists tell you that it's not or that it hasn't been, society has been built and maintained by men. Men do all the hard jobs. Men do all the dirty things. When there's a snowstorm and the power lines go down at 3 a.m, 99% of the time, the people that are out there fixing the power lines are men. The people that are going out and pulling people out of the river and out of the water when there's a flood, like in North Carolina, 99% of the time it's men. Society does not work without men that are actually active in their communities and active in society. So we can't just let men decide, oh, I don't want to be a man. And it is important to have masculine men. The left and feminists and stuff like that will push on any masculinity, and they'll call it toxic masculinity. Right. That's because feminists think that all men are either their dad or the president. That's it.
We have to acknowledge that, I'd say probably since the 70s, even if the society was built by men, it's largely been run by a feminist nature since like the 70s. And so now you have all these men who are told they're problematic for being who they are.
Well, you have women populating the classrooms, and you have women populating the boardrooms, increasingly in corporations as well. But I read in this piece that you've interacted with a lot of young men just by the nature of what you do as a musician. And they, I've heard this phrase so many times, like, this band or this artist saved my life. Yeah. And I always just kind of had raised an eyebrow at that, like, I find it worrying that people are in a situation where they would feel that way about just a musician or an artist of some kind. Why are they in that place, that dark place at all to begin with, do you think?
The why, I think, is actually, what was that?
Nothing.
Oh, the why is there's probably multiple reasons as to why, but when you have that kind of interaction over and over, you start thinking, well, what is it? It used to be that the most important thing to people, and young men in particular, was their family, their, the clubs that they'll be a part of, but their social interactions, their interactions with their neighbors and their community, and that was where you got, positive affirmation. That was where you found meaning. And Jordan Peterson is, in my opinion, he's right that there is a crisis of meaning. And so whether it be faith or whether it be community or whether it be something else, men need meaning. They need positive role models, and they need some reason to get up in the morning. And it should be family. That's the most important thing for most people, and it's the thing that gives most people meaning. When you have men that are deciding they don't want to start a family, or they don't want to try to start a project or build a business or whatever, you have a situation where a lot of men are like I said, opting out, and we need those people to opt in. We need those guys to opt in. And the ramifications of it are suicide, depression, and it's not just men that are suffering. You've got women that will constantly say, oh, where are all the good men? Or women that are depressed, they can't find, men that want to have a family, or they think that going out and just having a job is going to be the thing that's going to fulfill them. And then as they approach 30, they're like, oh no, this isn't what I want, and so there need to be men that are going to be there to be like, I am looking to start a family.
Before we continue on that thought, we got a 20 from Brian Tesh. Phil, it was great meeting you at Charlotte. Y'all killed it at the show. It's so cool when you grabbed that girl's phone and recorded yourself and the crowd.
Cheers.
PCC and HCB didn't know how to deal without you. Great to see you back. Okay, not sure how I feel about that subtle dig. We were just fine without Phil, but we are so happy that he's back.
Not a lot longer than 10 weeks. I'll admit that.
Not to glaze Phil too much, but I do enjoy Timcast more when you're on it.
I appreciate that.
Which I think you have a perspective that I think is sorely needed in a lot of those conversations.
Thank you.
And also, I mean, just to speak on some of what you were just talking about with you said you don't know how men get into that situation where a band could save their life. I mean, I've been in that situation myself, and coming into it, it really was loneliness. It was that, it's gotten better now. A lot of my friends, as we've grown, we've aged, some people are getting married. A lot of us are in really stable, long-term relationships. We have homes and dogs. Like, we're doing good. The boys made it, most of us.
Yeah.
But back then, you didn't feel like you could talk to your guy friends. You didn't want to be a wuss. You didn't want to be a sissy. Like those were all the terms that were getting thrown around. So where you could find some solace was in the people who have written music about feeling that way and about overcoming it. And a lot of the time you needed to start with the wallowing stuff where it was, I'm sad and I need to feel justified that I'm sad as a man. And then you can start to, climb out of it. And a lot of bands kind of almost went through that progression themselves. I wasn't into metal until later in my life. I mean, I say that like I'm old, but I wasn't into metal until college. Before that, for me, it was a lot of pop punk and emo stuff. And so bands like, for me, Simple Plan was huge. Yeah. I don't know if you have ever met them or, listened to them.
We got another 20 real quick from VWit. I have to touch on this as your Red Pill MGTOW base. There are a lot of reasons. Music has definitely saved my life. Phil is spitting facts and knows what he's talking about. Oh, put a girl on.
I don't get that.
That's what's so heartbreaking. With all due respect to Phil and other bands and Jordan Peterson, it's a damn shame that men have to go to strangers to find that role model in their life.
Yep.
Like there's no hometown heroes that are coming back from war anymore, right? There's no, I can't remember the fire department doing like children's events anymore, so you can see a positive masculine role model.
Or just basic male camaraderie.
Gone.
And
and so now Jordan Peterson, a random YouTuber from Canada, is resonating with the young American men because they have nobody in their corner.
Well, yeah, and one of the reasons is because male spaces have been, infiltrated intentionally and changed by feminists, by women. You don't even have the Boy Scouts anymore.
Yeah.
Now they're the Scouts. And that's a terrible, terrible thing for men and boys.
I know.
So we need, as a society, we need to understand that men are not an option. Like women don't get to exist in a happy society without men. As much as feminists will tell you, we don't need men, they're lying. They're lying, and the ones that think that they're like, oh, we don't need men, they end up miserable all the time. You hear people talk about it constantly, and I don't want to sound like I'm being derogatory, so I'm not going to say any of the cliches that are said about it. But women need men, and to have a happy life, you most people find a happy life by having a family.
Are you familiar with the Whatever podcast?
Yep.
And Andrew Wilson that goes on there pretty frequently?
Yep.
Well, he has this, it's a common talking point that comes up time and time again on that show with him, where the women on the panel who are self-proclaimed feminists, they cannot understand when his point when he's like, hey, laws and order and only exist because men are allowing it to exist.
Yep.
And they cannot understand, what do you
yes.
mean? But it's the law. They're like, it's only because men respect that piece of paper that we can have a civilized society, right? Without men upholding those rules, laws, and traditions, chaos would ensue, right?
I think
and they can't understand that. They're like, what?
I see that a lot in urban men too, like people who come from places where they are safe. Like for the most part, all of their needs are just kind of met. Everything's within 15 minutes. They don't really have to do anything aside from go to their job, earn their paycheck, and everything they could possibly buy is right there. they don't really have a concept of society not functioning that way. And I see it in politics with all of this, there's just kind of this urban derisive attitude towards the rural portions of the country from people who don't seem to understand that, yeah, you may have the population advantage. Those people grow your food. Mm-hmm. You don't live without them. They can live just fine without you. If you go away, they lose Hollywood. They don't get to watch TV. If they go away, you die.
And it's almost like, because we're in a feminized culture nowadays,
yep.
It's almost like, because the problems of men don't impact the powers that exist right now, it's like, oh, it doesn't impact me, so it's not a problem. It's not happening. And we're finding that it's like, oh, men complaining again, and what problems could they have? Like you started talking about, like, white men are told that they don't have problems because they have the privilege of being a white man. Yeah, so they everything else is invalidated.
Men commit suicide 4 times more frequently than women do. There are 4 men commit suicide for every 1 woman that does. Now there is a part of that is men are more aggressive overall than women, so men are more committed to actually doing it.
We use guns and nooses.
Yeah, whereas women don't, but it doesn't change the fact that the results are more men are dying. 60% of college students are women now. Men are not excelling in school anymore. All of school is designed for women. All of grade school 100%. And everything, when you just sitting, boys and girls are not the same. No matter how much the left tells you, they are not interchangeable cogs. And boys learn differently and need different things to what girls do. You don't want to go ahead and put a boy on Ritalin just because he's rambunctious. That's just being a boy.
I know.
That's not to say violence is okay. That's saying that when they want to get up and run around, that's just a boy being a boy.
Right.
That's not what girls do.
We got another 20, real quick, from Cartoon Post. People hate on them, but when I was a 16-year-old boy, I found the masculine way Adam Levine portrays himself in Maroon 5 music and music videos inspiring in a society where being masculine is mostly frowned on. I am surprised to hear that take. What do you think?
Now that I'm thinking about it, like older Maroon 5, yeah.
I guess I can see it.
Like Justin Timberlake masculinity.
It's in such short supply. Now, this is an op-ed. You had to keep it brief and you had to keep it factual. But one thing you mentioned was your experience growing up in a home with a father, which unfortunately a lot of young boys and young men don't have these days. I think you said it's 1 in 4 boys now grows up in a fatherless home. That comes with obviously a whole bunch of risk factors, not all of which you even mentioned. And you could have made this into like a 30,000 word analysis if you wanted to.
I know.
But you said, I consider myself lucky I had a dad who showed me what being a man is all about. And I want to ask you what that means.
Well, I think the very first thing about being a man is taking accountability and being responsible, right? Like, again, I don't want to get into memes or whatever, but men don't have the luxury, or at least if you want to be a good man that has a positive masculine role, men don't have the luxury of not being accountable for their actions.
Yeah.
You'll hear a lot of women or a lot of people, like I said, memes where it's like, women aren't accountable and blah, blah, blah. The ramifications for women tend to be significantly less for whatever they do. And people are usually available to help them get out of whatever situation they get into. How many times have you heard stories, and these are just anecdotes, but how many times have you heard stories about a girl say, oh, I got pulled over, but I smiled, and then I got a little teary, and the cop let me go. If I cry, a cop ain't letting me go.
No. That just makes you seem even more dangerous.
Exactly.
Our best option is like be as respectful as possible. Yeah. And then that's got like a 25% chance of working.
I've seen like these videos on YouTube where it's like body cam footage from police officers. And when they pull over a woman, it doesn't matter how old she is.
Yep.
She could look like a middle-aged professional. She's going to be calling her dad on the phone. I swear, these women, grown-ass women, they call their dad in a situation like that, in a crisis like that, because they know that men will come in to help, and they actually are happy to do so.
Yes, and there's one thing that I want to point out, like that I think people might miss. This is okay. The situation that we're in, where women get preferential treatment, that's okay. The problem is men are being disrespected constantly. It's okay that women get preferential treatment because that's what evolution has decided. That people, human beings, are more preferential to women. And the reason is because it takes a woman a whole long time and a lot of risk and a lot of problems to make another human being.
What's fast?
Men can, hold on a second. Men can get, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like men can just go ahead and impregnate multiple women, right? One guy and you could go ahead and have a bunch of babies. Women need men to protect them, whether a feminist believes it or agrees with it or not. Women need men to protect them, whether it be their boyfriend, their father, or their husband, or whatever. Or it'll be the cops, and it'll be the men that don't know them, but it'll be the society that has been built by men that'll protect them while the baby grows inside them, and then they need help to raise the baby. You can't raise a baby and work full time. You need help. And it's okay for society to say women need preferential treatment. That's okay. But the problem that we have nowadays is men are disrespected and told that they're not worth anything, they have no value, and they should feel ashamed for their existence and ashamed for being men, while at the same time women are saying, oh, everything a woman does, or feminists are saying, everything a woman does is fine. There is nothing that a woman ever does that's wrong. And if a man has a problem, he can go ahead and just go off and die. But women are what we're going to focus on, and we're just going to disrespect men. The problem is disrespecting men. The problem isn't the preferential treatment to women. That's okay, because that's what has helped our species succeed. But the disrespecting of men and treating men as if they're optional and they're disposable and they don't matter, that has to stop.
Before you respond, we have another 20 from Waffle Sensei. I talk to lots of young men too. What keeps men from being responsible is that they're shamed for being masculine and protective, and shamed for not being so. They are scorned either way, so they think, why be responsible?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. That speaks directly to my point. The disrespecting men for being men, the disrespecting boys for being boys. That's the problem, or that's, in my opinion, the biggest problem in society.
I think it's worse than the way you're framing it, though, because you're like, I could handle a little disrespect. All right, like I could handle someone being rude, but it's the like mainstream media, like a lot of the big pharma, they're actually actively putting a target on men's back. It's not just disrespect. It's saying this is a problem that we need to flush out. We need to fix. It
needs to be annihilated.
Exactly. So it's so much worse than just disrespect.
Yes.
It's an active campaign to get rid of
it's violent. It's violent. Sex selective abortions are legal in this country, whether you like it or not. Like, that's the truth. It is truly a violent drive to annihilate masculinity, not just disrespect it, scorn it. You have, what is that, the third crisis party
I'm not sure.
of the day?
I think
or
it's
is
the
it second today?
We're getting close to a third.
Thank you. We have another 20 from the Bass Eater. It's great to have you back, Bill. Keep destroying all enemies.
Thank you very much.
I asked Mary, she's like, Phil will be on tomorrow. I'm like, did he destroy all the enemies? Is
that's the most important question, right?
It is.
I think what drives so much of the resentment, too, is that it's not that men resent the expectation of protecting and providing for women, but it's that women now are encouraged to forsake everything that makes them these valuable, cherishable creatures. And I feel like I have such a high opinion of women and our nature and what we are supposed to be, what we were intended and created to be, that it just causes me anguish to see that happen. And men feel, what is their worth protecting now? And it's not a universal problem. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, but that's another huge problem, is that resentment between the sexes and this increasing stratification between the sexes on just about every issue, every facet of life.
To your point, there is, like, men have to live up to being like in charge. If you're a guy that's like, I want a traditional, be in a traditional marriage or traditional relationship, you have to live up to being good enough for a woman to listen to you. Right? If you're like, I want to be the guy that's in charge of my family and blah, blah, blah. You don't just get to be that guy and then sit on your butt. Right? Like that you have to be worth following.
Yeah.
To be a leader, you have to be worth following. And if you're not, no one's going to want to follow you. So the woman that you have in your life, if you're not taking care of her needs, if she can't trust you, if she doesn't feel like she can rely on you, she's not going to want to follow you. So that's going to mess up your whole entire life. And the same thing goes for women. If women want to be treated like princesses and treated like, a special, the apple of his eye and blah, 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 you have to be worth being treated like that.
We have another 20 from the Bass Eater. He said the B in my name is silent, by the way. Thank you for telling me. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah.
I want to forget that.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.